Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunnilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Stavaram Jangamam Vyaptam Yat Kinchit Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapti Yat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Om Bhataya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayana Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadyayini Ambartvamanusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshini Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Sunvanti Divyaistavai Vedai Sangapadakamo Vanishadai Gayanti Yam Samara Dhyanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidu Surasuraga Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha.
So we started chapter number 10. So we'll chant the two verses. I think we'll do two verses.
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha Bhuya Eva Mahabhago Shunu Me Paramam Vachaha Yateham Priyamanaya Vakshyami Hitanamyaya Name Vidu Suraganaha Prabhavam Namaharshayah Aham Adirgidevana Maharshinam cha sarvashaha.
So these two verses are the first two verses of chapter number 10. And it says, again, Almighty Arjuna, listen to my supreme words, which I, wishing your welfare, will declare to you who are delighted to hear me. Neither the host of heaven, nor the great rishis know my origin, for in every way I'm the source of all the devas and the rishis. So, like I was saying last week, is that chapter number 7, we begin to see the elaboration on the divine, because that is the part, the 6 chapters, the middle 6 chapters actually talk about the divine, divinity, and also the kind of relationship between that ultimate reality, the creation, and the individual. So the challenge for Arjuna is what? The challenge for Arjuna is really the recognition of divinity in all its forms. And Lord Krishna is making a very kind of complex, elaborate picture, giving him all these different ways in which he can recognize the divinity in the transactional world as well as the transcendental form, which is the absolute formless and nameless reality of Brahman. How can that be recognized as well? So, in order for Arjuna to come back and solve his problem once and for all, right? This is coming back to the basic idea of what this is all about. What is Bhagavad Gita all about? It's about trying to solve this fundamental problem in life, the problem of existence, the problem of identity, the problem of sorrow and suffering in this human identity. Okay? And therefore, the ultimate solution is recognition of one's own self as this divine self and then functioning in the world from that particular platform. So part of that challenge is how to recognize the divine in our day-to-day existence and be in touch with that existence so that slowly by slowly we begin to recognize the divine in all its manifestation, in all its form, the transcendental as well as the immanent, and then with that kind of sadhana, as it were, then one is able to recognize the self within. So this is the whole the 6 chapters, the middle 6 chapters, which are then elaborating on this relationship between the divine, the creation, and the individual, and then giving the nature of the divine so that we can begin to understand really how are we to be in touch with the divine every moment of our life. So that becomes, the sadhana, which is again the prescription, so that we should not forget that really behind all this philosophical, this kind of deep ideas, the prescription really is how do we recognize the divine in our day-to-day life. So he says again. Again means what? I'm going to repeat this knowledge to you again. Just like we tell our children again and again, haven't you listened? I told you again and again. You need to understand this. You need to understand this. So, for the benefit of Arjuna, who is delighted to listen to this, sometimes we don't want to hear these things again. But Arjuna is delighted. He says, yes, let me listen to this knowledge again so that I can become firm in my understanding, that I can have this knowledge, that I can understand it in such a way that I know what this is all about. So I am delighted to hear this knowledge from you, he says. And Lord Krishna says, I will repeat to you again and again for what? For your welfare. Welfare means what? Welfare means that his well-being, not only his psychological, mental well-being, but also his spiritual well-being. So you can see how much compassionate the Lord is, right? And we've seen throughout the Bhagavad Gita, this compassion for Lord Krishna, for Arjuna, is so much evident in all the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And not only for Arjuna, for each one of us, Lord Krishna is there as a compassionate Bhagavan who is there for us, supporting us all the time. If it is only for us to recognize where this is available to us, okay, it is available to us here and now. His grace and his blessing, just like Gurudev's grace and blessing is available to us. Even Bhagavan's compassion, saying that to Arjuna that I'm wishing for your welfare. He is wishing for our welfare, for you and me as well. Okay, so we should be delighted to hear this knowledge again and again, because it is really for our own welfare that this is important knowledge to kind of reflect on, understand, and then to try and kind of connect with our day-to-day activities and our sadhana. So he says, neither the hosts of heaven nor the great rishis know my origin, for in everywhere I am the source of all the devas and the rishis. So, this knowledge, he says, is this knowledge, the supreme word he's saying, which I'm going to tell you again. Actually, it is very special because, the hosts of heaven, which is all the devas and the rishis, my, um, they don't know me as the source. They don't know my origin. So, on the one hand, we can think of the devas and the rishis as these entities which are existing in other realms of this creation, or like Gurudev is giving us the interpretation here, is there's a Sapta Rishis, and here we see the names of all the Sapta Rishis here. That the Sapta Rishis are objectified representations of the subjective facts in Vedanta. Now, this subjective fact, just to kind of get this again clear in our mind, is a metaphorical way of describing the whole of creation, the macrocosm. The macrocosm, according to the Sankhya philosophy, is coming about as a result of the conjunction of Purusha and Prakriti. So when Purusha, which is a pure consciousness, is in conjunction with Pradhan. Pradhan is the Mula Prakriti, which is the unmanifest Prakriti. The unmanifest consciousness and the unmanifest Prakriti, when they combine together, they come into conjunction, it begins to evolve into this creative process whereby the first evolute of that creation is Mahat. Mahat is the total mind. Okay, Mahat is the total mind, and he says Mahat Tattva, which is then it is equivalent to the concept of the God principle, Parmeshwara. So Parmeshwara is again mentioned in later on in this chapter, but really speaking, that it is the intellect which is the first one to evolve at the macrocosmic level. And then coming from the Mahat is the Ahankara, and from the Ahankara, the Tanmatras, and so on until the whole of creation is kind of is created through that conjunction of Purusha and Prakriti. So this is the Sankhya philosophy, and therefore it means that the seven rishis together represents the intellectual and the mental life of man at the microcosmic level. Okay, so what does it mean? I mean, it sounds as if it's very abstract, but really speaking, it is not abstract because you and me, we can experience this Sapta Rishis here and now. Okay, the Sapta Rishis are here and now in terms of our buddhi, our ahankar, our tanmatras, which is contained in this individuality and functioning through this individuality to give us this world of experiences.
So, Ramesh, can you just explain what the cosmic intellect?
Okay, so the cosmic intellect is the total mind. Remember the concept of total mind, which has come before, and this total mind is as if a combination of all the minds together in the totality of the universe. Okay, so from the Vedantic, this is the Sankhya philosophy. Remember, this is Sankhya way of describing the creation of the universe. Whereas in Vedanta, we talk about the creation of universe as what? Ishvara is what? Brahman plus Maya is equal to Ishvara. Right? So here, it is not that Mahat comes out of this combination of Brahman and Maya. This is again Sankhya philosophy, which is the dualistic principle. But it is a good way of understanding what is being said here in terms of the relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm. So in terms of Advaita Vedanta, it says that the evolutes of the kind of creation which comes about when Brahman and Maya are coming together, or Maya is expressing Brahman through its own powers as this whole created universe. It starts by saying the purest principles of Prakriti first of all arise: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And this is now, as you remember in the book Self Unfoldment, it gives a whole chart about how this evolution is coming about. So if you haven't seen it, just see, so that you can know the difference between the kind of two philosophies which we are talking about. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, in their purest form, appear as the Trinity. Trinity is what? Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. Okay. So in the purest form, the Sattva is Brahma, Rajas is Vishnu, and Rajas is Vishnu because he then comes into the world, and he is the Rajasic element which creates movement, and then Tamas is Shiva. So those are the purest elements, and then of course we have got the kind of evolution which comes about from there. So slightly different idea about how this is coming about, but the essential thing to remember is what he is leading us into thinking about the macrocosm and the microcosm. Why? Why? Because we can begin to understand the elements which we have in terms of the body mind intellect, and who is the lord of this body mind intellect. And that he goes on to say in the next one. But just remember that this is the efficient and the material cause of all creation, and the efficient and material cause of the individual creation as well. So what applies at the macrocosmic level also applies at the microcosmic level. And here then he goes on to say the devas represent what? The devas represents the sense organs which illumine for us the world of objects for our innumerable experiences. Okay, so we have got the body mind intellect, and we have got the sense organs specifically mentioned here as the devas. Okay, so my father used to say, now I'm getting old and my devas are beginning to retire. Can't hear, can't see properly, and he used to say, now just you have to speak a bit louder because my deva of the year is retiring. So, as we get older, the devas begin to kind of say, okay, now we have had enough of this listening and then looking, so I'm going to retire now. So these devas are the sense organs, and the sense organs is our interface with the world of names and forms. And this interface is where we begin to get the knowledge of the world through the sense organs. So now if we say, coming back to this verse which is saying, the rishis, the sapta rishis and the devas do not know me. They do not know my origin. What does it mean? It means the ultimate reality cannot be gained by the sense organs, the devas. The ultimate reality cannot be gained by the saptarishis, which means through the body mind intellect and or through the sense organs, one cannot get to know the ultimate reality. Here, knowing is not knowing intellectually, because intellectually we can know. Buddhi is capable of knowing this as an intellectual knowledge. But you remember that we are talking both about the chapter number 8 was what? That we've done in the past, we've forgotten. What is the yogic? Jnana and Vijnana, right? So, in other words, that it is not just the intellectual knowledge, it means that the experiential knowledge is also to be there. In other words, my knowledge as identification with Brahman is not available to this lower Prakriti. And you remember chapter 7 was talking about the lower Prakriti and the higher Prakriti. Again, you see how Lord Krishna is so elaborate in his explanation about the lower Prakriti, higher Prakriti, Saguna Brahma, Nirguna Brahma, the relationship between both these things and how it is related to the individual, the macrocosm and the microcosm. He paints a very beautiful picture of the divine. Okay, and if you look at all these aspects, we see that in this case, what we are talking about is that the individual instruments of the body mind intellect together with the sense organs is not capable of knowing this ultimate reality, which is Krishna, which is Brahman in this case. So the instruments of cognition cannot itself cognize the objects, but needs an intelligent observer to make use of that instrument, is what Gurudev is saying. Okay. In short, consciousness being the very subjective truth. Now this is what we're talking about. Brahman as a subjective truth can never be an object of perception for the sense organs or the mind or the intellect. Okay. So again, a fundamental principle in Advaita Vedanta, subjective truth cannot be an object of either the mind or the intellect or the sense organs. Okay. It is a subjective truth. It is not an object of perception. Therefore, if we read it in that light, then this particular verse makes sense when Lord Krishna is saying that neither the Devas nor the Rishis know my origin, for every way I'm the source of all the Devas and the Rishis. So this is the second part of it, which says, in fact, the body, mind, intellect, and the sense organs are coming from where? Efficient and material cause. These are coming again from the source of all this thing is Brahman itself, right? So then the question arises: if it is not possible for this to be known by the Saptarishis and the Devas, then does it mean that nobody can come to realize the self, which is the origin of our physical, mental, intellectual life? So to dispel this fear, Lord Krishna is going on to the next verse, which says that yes, amongst the mortals, which is you and me, amongst the mortals, I can be known through this particular method. So here he's giving us the way in which this can be done.
Yoma Majamanadim cha Veti Lokamaheshwaram Asambhurasamateshu Sarvapapai Pramuchyate Yoma Majamanadim cha Veti Lokamaheshwaram Asambhurasamateshu Sarvapapai Pramuchyate.
So he who amongst the mortals knows me as the unborn and beginningless, as the great Lord of the worlds, he is undeluded and is liberated from all sins. So here we are again talking about the mortals. Now mortals, if we refer back to the last verse, then the mortals are who? Who are the mortals? Yeah, so the Rishis and the Devas, right? The Rishis and the Devas coming together, these are the mortals, and he has already said they don't know my origin. But in this case, if we bring it down to the level of the individual, the microcosmic level, then it is you and me, right? We are the mortals. And mortals put in contrast to the three things which he is mentioning here. That which is unborn, that which is beginningless, and that which is the great Lord of the worlds. So we can think of these two things as kind of contrary, opposite, in the sense that the mortal is describing as mortal because he has got a birth and a death, whereas here he says unborn, beginningless, and then the Lord of the worlds, which means that the individual is not the Lord of the worlds. The Lord of the worlds is something which is at the cosmic level and beyond. So even the cosmos is being kind of lorded over, as it were, by by Krishna, who is this ultimate reality. So he who knows me as unborn, beginningless, as the great Lord of the world, he is undeluded. Undeluded, which means that he is no longer a mudha. Mudha, he has already described to us, the various different classification of the human being. So he says he is undiluted. He is no longer a mudha, and he says that he amongst the mortals, when he knows me as unborn, beginningless, and great lords of the world, he is not deluded, and he is liberated from all sins. So how can we put this into the context of what we've already read about as the Saptarishis and the body mind intellect, and how on the one hand he is saying the Saptarishis and the Devas cannot know me directly as this subjective truth. But then he goes on to say, but those who recognize me as the unborn and the beginningless and the Lord of all the worlds, then that person is undeluded, which means most of the mortals are going to be in what state? Deluded state. Just to make sure you're still awake. So deluded state is whereby there is no recognition of any of these things. And this is the state of the majority of the beings, because they cannot recognize, they have not known this particular aspect of the divine, which he's saying is these three things. And he says that in order to become undeluded, then these things are to be known. And he's saying the consequence of this particular um, removal of delusion is that they become liberated from all sins. So let's see one by one what he's saying. So he who knows me is not, like Gurudev is saying, it's not just about intellectual comprehension. Okay, it is true and spiritual apprehension which comes at once during the moments of one's intimate identification with the self. Again, I said just a few minutes ago that it's not about intellectual knowledge. It is really about having this clear identity with that ultimate truth. In other words, the self in me is the same self in everything else, and it is the same self as Brahman. Okay? So this identity of the individual Atman with the ultimate Brahman, this is again another fundamental principle in Advaita Vedanta, which says the Atman and Brahman are one and the same. So identification with the Atman rather than the equipment of the body-mind intellect is what he's talking about when he says not the intellectual comprehension of the idea of Brahman, which we are all aware of, but really the true identification with that self which is unborn, beginningless, and the great Lord of the world. So the self is to be realized as these three things. The self is to be realized as these three things, and if this is recognized in this individuality, then we go beyond delusion and we go beyond all sin. So what is it this which is unborn? He says the infinite can never ever be born. So infinite by its very definition cannot be born, and he says it may express itself in this finite manifestation, and Gurudev gives the example of the ghost and the post. Okay. So this example is again a reflection of the idea of what? What is the idea of the ghost and the post?
The post is and will always be.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It doesn't change.
Okay. So again, it's giving us the concept of Brahman and Maya. So with the Maya, then the ghost appears on the post, and the post is always there, whereas the ghost can come and go depending on the understanding and the experience of the individual who is watching out for the ghost in the ghost in the post. So he says the post is as if born from the, the ghost is born as if from the post, but the post is always unborn. In other words, Brahman is infinite, it is never born, it is unborn, it remains as it were, it is changeless, and on this unchanging substratum is what we see as the changing world of creation. So another example which we have seen before is, anybody remember the change in the changeless? Snake in the road. Waves in the water, the screen and the movie, right? Also, the screen remains unchanged. It is always the same. It does not get affected by whatever is projected on it. It remains ever, in this kind of way, but it is unborn, as it were. It is eternal, birthless, and on this, he says the waves are born out of the ocean. The snake is born out of the rope, the ghost is born out of the post, and so on and so on. But in itself, it is infinite and it is changeless, and it is not subject to any kind of birth. And therefore, if it is infinite and unborn, then it means that there is no beginning and there is no end either. Okay? So the aspect of unborn of this divinity is also related to the beginningless and also related to the third aspect, which is the Lord of the whole world, Sarva Loka Maheshwara. Again, Gurudev gives a slightly different commentary on this particular one, because Sarva Loka Maheshwara means that the great Lord of the world. So one can see, okay, now there is a great Lord sitting in the sky somewhere, and who is ruling over this world. Or we can say it is he's ruling over the whole of creation, and therefore, as a Lord would rule his kingdom, so the Lord is ruling the world. But what the commentary is saying is that the word loka, comes from the root meaning to experience. Okay, so loka is the world of experiences. So when we say Swarga Loka, what does it mean? It means that where we are in that experience of bliss, of happiness. Okay, so when you are in that particular mode of experience whereby you are experiencing this extreme joy or happiness, it is as if you are in Swargaloka. Or if you are experiencing extreme sorrow and suffering, then you are as if in which loka?
Yeah, think about it.
Don't think about it. It's Sunday morning, we don't want to think about those things. So if we say the loka is the experience the field for experiencing, in this sense that it is said that the loka represents the world of experiences, and therefore the physical world experienced by our physical equipment, but it includes all the feelings and ideas and recognized and experienced by all of us in all our lives. So this world of experiences, and if we say, who is the Lord of all these experiences which are going on? Okay. So this fits in with what we've been saying earlier. Who is the Lord? In this case, what does it mean when he says the Lord of experiences? Is that the essential factor in this world of experiences, which is the pure awareness of pure consciousness, without which I am dead to the world, and without which the experiences are not available. In other words, that the Lord of all these experiences is what? is this pure awareness, pure consciousness. In other words, Brahman. Atman in the individual. Say this Atman is the Lord of all these experiences. Okay? Why? Because it is only because of this particular presence of this Atman that the rest of the things are functioning. Okay? So you remember the idea of sentiency. What does it mean when we say something is sentient, that you and me are sentient? Where does this sentiency come from? Okay? How is it that I'm aware? How is it that I'm aware of my thoughts and I'm aware of my feelings, that I'm aware of my sensations, that my sense organs are functioning at it? I can see the world around me. What is it making me to be able to function in this way? It's because of Brahman. Brahman imparts its sentiency to the pure intellect as awareness and I-ness, which in turn imparts it sentiency to the mind, which becomes aware of the feelings, which in turn imparts its sentiency to the body and the sense organs. So it is like the Bank of England then gives lending to right up to the point whereby the individual is getting the money from the bank. Okay? So in this case, what does it mean? Who is the Lord? Who is the governor? Who is the Lord? It is Brahman. And in this case, knowing me as this Lord, then one becomes undeluded. So what does it mean? This essential factor, the pure consciousness, if I know this as the beginningless and the unborn, and as the pure essential consciousness and awareness, if I have this subjective experience of this truth, then I go beyond delusion. What is the delusion?
I am the
body.
I am the body, mind, and soul. Okay. Just to remind ourselves. So if I say that I am got the body, mind, intellect, then I am in this state of delusion. If I recognize that I'm beyond the body, mind, intellect, and I'm this essential factor called the pure consciousness, then I've gone beyond the identity of the body, mind, intellect, and I've got identified with that which is pure consciousness, Satchidanand, which is Brahman. Therefore, I am now undeluded. If I'm undeluded, he says, then what happens is that I become liberated from all sins. Okay. So, he who knows me as the birthless, beginningless, and as the great Lord, he ends his delusion. So the delusion has come to the end because I'm no longer identified with the body, mind, intellect. I know myself as Brahman, and therefore he says the grinning ghost cannot never frighten me because I've gone beyond the illusion of the ghost in the post. So just like when I get frightened of the snake, which I see in front of me, and the light is switched on, and I see the snake as the rope, delusion is gone. Okay. When I see the rope as the substratum of the snake, which I had imagined on top of the rope, in this darkness, in this ignorance, and when the light is switched on, what do I see? The snake is gone. If the snake is gone, delusion is gone. If the delusion is gone, the fear is gone. Okay. So in this case, when one steps beyond the delusion, then what happens is that one is also liberated from the sins. Now, what are the sins he's talking about? He's saying it's not this idea of the man is not punished for his sins, but he is punished by his sins. So sin is a self-insulting act arising of a misunderstanding in the sinner as to his own identity. As long as the delusion is there, then the identity is there. As long as the identity is there, the me and the mine is there. As long as the me and the mine is there, there is going to be sin. Sin in the sense of moving away from my divine nature, as long as I function in the world, of getting away from my divine nature, and when I function from the ego, that itself is living in sin. Okay? So when I'm functioning from my identity and transacting in the world, all those transactions are nothing but sin. If I start moving towards divinity through my sadhana, then those are all punyas. Okay? Punya karma. So what are the punya karmas? What do we do on a daily basis which can be called punya karma?
Devotion, prayers.
That's right. So anything which you do, which is reminding you of the Lord, which is connecting you with that divinity, is punya karma. Okay. So Patanjali, as I was saying, that he mentions that the river can flow in two directions. Okay. Depends where you're going to switch over. The river of the mind flows towards papa and it flows towards punya. Papa takes you towards identification and delusion. Punya takes you towards kalyan and liberation. And who is responsible for switching over?
Mind.
The intellect. So the intellect, this is what Lord Krishna calls buddhi yoga. Right? In a sense, buddhi yoga is what? Is to make sure that the flow is going in the right direction. Okay? The flow of thoughts is going in the right direction. The flow of feelings is going in the right direction. Okay? And also the transactional world, our transactions are going in the right direction. Okay? Which means what in one word? Dharma. Okay. Dharma. Perform your dharma, whether it is your dharma as whatever role you have in life, and practicing dharma. You remember in the last chapter, Lord Krishna was saying, offer everything to me, whatever transaction you're doing, offer that to me as the Lord of all beings, then that will come to me, and therefore that will release you from this sense of me and mine, and therefore releasing yourself from the me and mine, you are no longer kind of affected by this kind of sin. So, liberated.
Can I just
Yeah.
join?
Yeah.
Before we were saying
Yeah.
that our experiences are with all the Brahman.
Yeah.
And now we're saying that you are responsible for your path and thing.
Yes.
So, your experience is good and bad, whatever.
Yes.
They're not because of Brahman. That's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is in other
They're
words,
illumined by Brahman.
they're illumined by Brahman, but when they're illumined by Brahman, right? What happens is that because that Brahman is not available to me, I think of myself as this individual body, mind, intellect.
Right.
In that case, a prescription is given to me.
Yeah.
Because I am in this state of identification. So Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, you are identified with your body, mind, intellect.
Yeah.
You are feeling this grief for your kith and kin. And because in that state of identification, you need a first prescription. The first stage of treatment is what? Is that you yourself, having been identified with the body, mind, intellect, function from there. In other words, I say to myself, I can make choices. Why? Because I am this body, mind, intellect. Yeah. I can make choices. I can function in the world. I can transact in the world. And therefore, the first prescription, first stage of treatment is what? Karma yoga. Right? That now starts taking me away from this identification slowly by slowly. As long as I'm in the state of identification, I am in a state of making choices. And as long as I'm in a state of making choices, the prescription is follow your dharma. But as soon as I transcend the body, mind, intellect, then Lord Krishna says, forget about everything. Chapter 18. verse number 66.
Yeah.
That you have now reached a stage whereby you don't have to practice anything, you become dharma yourself.
Mm.
You see what I mean? So then there's no question of identity. It's a question of body, mind, intellect functioning with that divinity, expressing itself through this instrument of the body, mind.
So I am responsible for everything I do.
As long as I'm
deluded
identified.
or undeluded.
No, in the state of delusion, I'm responsible. In the state of undelusion,
There is nothing.
there is nothing. Because then I switch over from one operating system to the other operating system.
Yeah.
Then there is no person to make decisions. Okay? And in this case, divinity expresses itself to the body, mind, intellect spontaneously and as required. Right? So then there is no question of making any kind of choice.
Okay.
So as long, that's why he said liberated from sins. Because if I say that I am responsible for making these particular choices, then I've got a choice of either creating punya or creating papa. But in that state of undelusion, then there is nothing, because the person who was identified with his body, mind, intellect no longer exists. Okay.
It's fine actually.
Okay.
Yes, it's bypassing. But typical of Krishna, it's like say it one way and then say it another way.
That's only for our benefit, for our own welfare. Like he's saying, it's only for our own welfare, because we will have so many doubts and questions.
Yeah.
I think what the whole point of Lord Krishna is to show you different facets of the same truth.
Yeah.
So that there is no kind of doubt left in our mind that what about this particular angle? What about this angle? What about this angle? All these angles are given. Okay. So then there is no doubt. Because Lord Krishna could have said in one verse, he could have said, "You are the eternal spirit. Why are you grieving?" Right? You could have just finished the whole Bhagavad Gita in one verse, but no. 700 and how many? 701 verse, is it? Which now gives you a complete and full picture of divinity, of yourself, and the whole of creation, and the relationship between all these three fundamental things of our life. There's no doubt. Okay, so this is what happens. So then if we follow this kind of logic behind the last three verses, what he's saying that this truth has to be known, and this truth has to be known, but it cannot be known by the Saptarishis and what you call the Devas, but in a sense that it can be known, and the method of knowing, of course, is the sadhana which has been prescribing throughout the previous chapters. And he says once that is known, once you know this reality as unborn, beginningless, and the Lord of the Sarvaloka Maheshwara, then it means that you have reached the point of non-delusion. In other words, that you recognize that the reality, the ultimate reality, and therefore you've gone beyond this individual identity. Having gone beyond this individual identity, you are now liberated from sin. So this is what. So how the self is the Lord of all worlds. So there is a kind of description of some of the attributes which we can think of as how this self is the Lord of all worlds, and what are the kind of attributes or the characteristics or the processes which are taking place, which can be described in the individual now. So we are now coming from the cosmic level to the microcosmic level, whereby now we are beginning to think. Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, look at all these various different things, and not only these things, but the opposite of these things represents the variety of the world of experiences, the variety of all the processes, and the variety of all the various different instruments which are also there. So let's chant number 4 and 5 together.
बुद्धिर्ज्ञानमसम्मोहः क्षमा सत्यं दमः शमः सुखं दुःखं भवो भावः भयं च भयमेव च अहिंसा समता तुष्टिः तपोदानं यशो यशः भवन्ति भावा भूतानां मत्त एव पृथग्विदाः Together.
So, which says intellect, wisdom, non-illusion, forgiveness, truth, self-restraint, calmness, happiness, pain, birth, death, etc., fear, and also fearlessness. Non-injury, equanimity, contentment, austerity, beneficence, pain, infamy, all these different kinds of qualities of being arise from me alone. So you see, our Lord Krishna again, just to make things clear, is not only talking about the macrocosmic world and what we see in the macrocosm. So what do we see in the macrocosm? Objects of the world, the whole universe, the planets, the sun and the moon, and all the individual objects on this planet we see, all these things are seen as an expression of that divinity. At the individual level, then there is a whole world which is created in the macrocosm. And in this macrocosm, what you're saying is that all these things are qualities expressed by the mind and the intellect of man. Okay? So the world of names and forms externally and the world of names and forms internally, and these are all expressions through the mind and the intellect, and we can understand this as a comprehensive definition of creation. Okay, both at the macrocosmic level and at the microcosmic level, and it indicates our inner life. So the outer life is the outer life of perception of the names and the forms of the world, and the inner life is now what he's talking about, so that there is no doubt that we are only talking about the external world and the creation of the external world. What we are also talking about are all these things which are happening in our inner world, and the inner world is being illumined by what? By the self. Okay, and that self which we have seen in the last verse is the unborn, the beginningless, the Lord Maheshwara, and that is nothing but the self which is now presiding over, as it were, all these things which are taking place in the inner world. Okay, so sensations in the body, feelings in the mind, thoughts in the intellect, and all these different qualities which is talking about, the mental qualities, and these kind of represents the world of experiences, the inner world of experiences, and he says that it will be noticed that only the positive qualities are enumerated, but there are some negative qualities as well here. But positive qualities are much more easy to identify as divine, right? This we have seen before, that positive things are much more easier to identify as divine, but not necessarily the negative ones. But what he's saying here is both the positive and the negative, which are the opposite qualities of all these things which he's mentioning here, these are also born of the divine. So, in other words, that the qualities mentioned here and their opposite qualities constitute the whole world of experiences. And Gurudev is saying, pointing out here, is that it looks as if these qualities indicate a complete classification of the entire world of beings and their field of experiences. So again, a comprehensive list of all the inner things. If we take those particular attributes which are being given here and their opposites, then that constitutes the whole world of inner experiences which are there.
Typical of Krishna.
Yeah.
I am responsible for your intellect and for your delusion,
Yeah,
but it's your responsibility to get rid of that delusion.
that's it. Yeah.
I'm the one who's causing that delusion, but you get rid of that delusion. You do that work, Krishna. You caused it. So lazy.
He is lazy, but he has given us the willpower and he's given us the freedom of choice. And he is sporting. This is his sport. This is his leela. So my father used to say again, your leela and my dasha. Look at your leela and look at my dasha. You know, I am suffering because of your leela. What do you want me to do?
But we just have been through all the chapter 3 and 4 to
Yeah.
say that what we are suffering has been our own cause. It's part of the karma cycle,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So
That's right.
he's already laid out his rules,
Yes.
and if we hope that he's going to pull us out, he's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. So yeah, it is the law of karma which is operating in this transactional world. Okay. In this,
If we started off as being Satya
Yeah.
and pure,
Mm.
how, and that's how Krishna created us,
Yeah.
how did we get to where we got to?
yeah.
And why? If it's all Krishna's doing,
Yeah.
and I don't know whether under Hinduism we believe that, but certainly under Christianity they start off with Adam and Eve, right?
That's right.
And,
That's right.
you know, both were pure,
Yes.
and then something happened, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we,
yeah.
we started the
Yes.
the cycle of the karma.
Yeah.
If you look at it from that perspective,
Yes. Right.
from Hinduism perspective, I don't really understand how we got to
Yeah. Well, yeah,
having
no.
the vasanas and having the karmas. If we all started off with a nice clean slate.
Because the first time he gave us a laddu, we ate it.
Like the apple.
Right, and then the next time we wanted one that belonged to someone else, and we went and grabbed it, and we liked it so much that we wanted it all the time. So you forgot that you're pure and kept wanting more stuff.
But where do we get the like?
Okay. So in fact, I yesterday I was with Reverend Tom Wilson, and we were having this conversation between Christianity and Hinduism. So there's some very fundamental differences between the two, and the idea of creation is one of them. So you know, and the idea of creation and also the idea of individual. So you know, according to Christian thinking, man is born a sinner, right? And you have to redeem yourself through you know salvation through Christ. Whereas here we are talking about creation in a different way. So, for example, when he's talking about the Sankhya philosophy and the creation of the world, starting with Mahat and then going on to Ahankara and then going on to Tadmatras and the sense organs and all these kind of things. If we look at it from the even from the Advaita Vedanta point of view, what happens is that once the Prakriti has been created, Prakriti is then subject to certain laws which govern that Prakriti. Okay? And the three attributes of Prakriti are the ones which then govern how this whole process is going to unfold. So it is through the Prakriti and through the creation of all these names and forms, including you and me, which are subject to this material Prakriti, the combination and the interaction of the gunas and the kind of mixing and unmixing and all these kind of things which is happening, which is really the processes of nature, which gives rise to this whole evolution. And therefore, we then start kind of functioning within that system of the gunas, whereby we start with the purest forms of the gunas, which is Satya Yuga. Right up to then we kind of make this transition from, from all the yugas to Kali Yuga, whereby now even at the cosmic level, you see the gunas kind of mixing and playing in different ways, in different yugas, and also in the individual in different ways in different times. Okay, so what I'm saying is really it's not the fault of anybody that we are where we are. It is just the nature of Prakriti which has given rise to this kind of world and this kind of universe, because there are other universes which don't obey the same rules, which are not subject to the same kind of laws of nature. There are other universes where there are no gunas.
No, but it was in the earlier
But
chapters.
I'm aware of time as well. We have to go for the next class.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we have
sorry,
to
I
stop
didn't
here.
realize
So
That's why.
we'll take this up. But what the basic idea here is that as soon as the creation has taken place, it is then governed by the inherent laws of that particular Prakriti, and that is what gives rise to all these things which we now see. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you. We can continue. The interest. Don't want to be late for them. To be late. The next.
It's a good subject for TV.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we'll just conclude with the prayers, and next week there is
Gita Jayanti.
Gita Jayanti, so there's no class, and then I think we'll have a couple more classes before the end of the year. Let's see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, we can kind of break off at this stage and meet again in January, which is then going to be a long break.
We are not here on 23rd December, but
Yeah.
we'll be here on 16th.
Okay, so let's say 16th is going to be perhaps our last class for this year. Okay, so let's conclude with the prayers. Om
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyit dukkha bhave, asato ma satgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Quick announcements. So we've got the Gita Jayanti next week. It starts at 10 o'clock.